I have a lot of fun fixing old hardware. I bought this Game Boy Color on eBay. This was advertised as a junk unit, and I think it's got a lot going for it still. I'm not crazy about the color, and I'll probably swap the shell. But let's just open this up and see if we can get this working. This cost me $30 US. It was classified as junk as mentioned, and it was said that this was not working. It had no battery cover, it was the system only. They also said that there was some AA battery leakage, and that seems to be the case. And it was slightly discolored. I mean, it looks slightly discolored, but this is pretty much to be expected for a device this old. It was also said that the screen had some scratches, and that's definitely an accurate statement. Let's check this out to see if it's actually not working and if we can fix this up. And this will be pretty funny if it turns on. Okay, well that was a short video. No, I'm just kidding. Let's take a closer look. The speaker also seems to work. You probably can't hear this, but there's a little bit of buzzing coming from the speaker itself. But at least it works. So let's open this up and take a closer look. Let's go ahead and remove those batteries. Awesome. With all the screws out, let's go ahead and remove the back. Appears to be in pretty good shape though. Let's load this under the microscope and take a closer look. It looks a little dirty, but I'm not seeing anything out of place. There's the power switch. It doesn't look too bad though. The CPU looks fine. There's something on there, I'm not sure what that is, but let's lift that out of the way. The link port appears to be a little wobbly, but I think it'll be okay. The volume wheel seems to work. We'll take a closer look in this cartridge slot in a second. Capacitor's on there okay. Just looks a little dirty. There's a little bit of corrosion on the headphone jack, but this is pretty typical. Speaker looks a little dirty too, but we can clean that off. I recently checked out a yellow Game Boy, and I tried changing this because this was related to sound, but I tore the bottom trace off, so we can double check these to make sure they're working. But the good thing is these don't seem to have any sort of corrosion on them. There's some on the battery terminals though. This is pretty typical. The positive battery terminal actually looks to be okay. I think it's just mostly the negative one. Okay, let's take a closer look at that cartridge slot itself. All the pins look okay. What the heck is this? I think that's a bug. Just had to get some of the clamps to hold this in place so we can take a closer look at this. Yeah, that's a bug. So I guess I'll just pick that out. Not even sure what that is. Is that a spider? Anyways, I'm just gonna throw that away. Aside from needing a cleaning, the cartridge slot pins look okay. I'm not really seeing anything else out of the ordinary on this side, so we better just flip it over and check the other side. Let's unlock the ribbon cable and flip this over. I'm not seeing anything that looks to be that bad. Power switch looks a little dirty, but we're gonna clean that off. No corrosion or anything. Cartridge slot pins just appear to be a little dirty, but we can clean those off. There's some hair in there. We'll clean up the A and B buttons too. Here's a look at this speaker. Wow. I'm kind of at a loss for words when I see this. Well, if you've ever wondered what part of the Game Boy gets the dirtiest, my money's on the speaker. So what I think we should do now is just start cleaning up this unit and see what it looks like when we're done. This doesn't look too bad either, but I'm just going to go over the whole board. Give it a good clean. For a lot of the tougher parts, I'm going to have to go over this with a toothbrush. I can't really get this off, but I'm not sure if this is just wear on the pad or what this is. Yeah, the link port and the volume wheel could use a little cleaning, so let's clean those too. A little bit of 99% IPA in there, just to get the volume wheel working. We'll put a little bit in the link port too. Maybe I can clean that out with a brush a little bit better. That looks a lot better. Might as well clean out the power switch while we have it under the microscope. That's looking a lot better. Might as well try to clean up the 3.5mm headphone jack while we're at it. If you remember the yellow Game Boy I did, I think this is a lot better than that one. I think most of this is surface rest, so it should come off pretty easy. Ooh, maybe it's underneath too. Just try cleaning a little bit of that up with this brush. Try cleaning it up with a toothbrush and see if we can get any more of that off. Might have to put some vinegar on this other one. Someone left in the comments below that vinegar works really good on these. I'm going to try some vinegar on the negative battery terminal just to see how that works. So I got vinegar on the toothbrush. Might have to let it soak in it though. I think what I'm going to do is just scrub at this for a little bit to see if I can get that any cleaner than what it already is. And then we'll be back to take a closer look at it. While this isn't exactly perfect, I think it's a lot better than what it was. Hopefully that should be okay for a few more years. Do you guys think this looks okay? And should I change these or just leave the ones as is? I don't plan on using these rubber membranes, but let's take a peek underneath just to see what they look like. These are definitely going to need to be changed, and this one is also torn. We can always reuse these buttons though. The board is in great shape, but we might as well save the screen too, just in case I need any extra parts. To get the screen out, I'm just going to twist this ever so slightly. This should get the glue off, and I can easily pull this out. I should be able to anyways. The LCD seems to work still, so I'm definitely going to save this. It doesn't appear to be burnt either, and I think most of it was just on the lens itself, so I'll keep this as a spare. The next thing I want to do is put this into its new shell. I picked up one of these Funnyplaying IPS kits, and this is what we're going to install on it. Hopefully it's a little better than the Game Boy Advance one. And of course, I had to go for another clear red shell. I do love my red. So we got the donor board, the IPS screen, a transparent red shell. I got some black face buttons, and some black rubber membranes. Thankfully, Funnyplaying also sends out some labels, so we'll put these on too. It's got the Game Boy Color logo, the serial number, and underneath that is the little Nintendo one. Nice. Let's take the shell out first. I think this is also the same shell that they use for their FPGA kits, but I've been a really big fan of that red ever since trying that kit out, so I obviously had to try this with an official Game Boy. Before we install it, let's just test the screen to make sure that works. You do have to connect the screen to the motherboard itself. So far it should look like something like this. Then we just have to put the back on, put some batteries in it, and make sure it starts up. That's kind of hard to film, but I managed to check it out and it seems to be working okay. So let's proceed to the next step. I'm just going to disconnect this ribbon cable now so we can pre-tin these pads. They've actually managed to pre-attach this on the back of my screen. But I do want to put this insulation film down, so I'm going to have to peel this up first before I put this down. I'm also going to go ahead and detach this ribbon cable so I can get this off. With that out of the way, this should be able to come off pretty easy. And we can drop that insulation film on the back. I actually had to peel mine off, so it doesn't look very good, but I managed to put it back on and it should do its job well. This is only going on there to protect the back of the screen from shorting out. I recommend lining up with one of the corners, then leaning it down on the top before placing it down. Peel off the 3M tape so we can attach it in the shell. Once we peel these off, we just drop it into place. This attaches the same way that it did on the FPGA kit. It'll go down through the bottom like this, then we can just drop it into place. I did also remove the screen protector so that doesn't get caught under any of the edges. Once we line that up, just go ahead and drop that down, and it should be in place. That already looks really nice. Go ahead and set your soldering iron to 300 degrees so we can pre-tin those pads. I'm using the Pine-Sol version 2 if you're interested in this one. I'm going to put a tiny bit of flux on those just so it goes on easy. Make sure to clean around where you soldered with the flux just before you proceed. I don't know why, but for some reason I used to be scared of doing mods like this, but with flux it makes it pretty easy even if you're an absolute beginner. We also have to attach the little test point wires that they gave us, so all I'm going to do is just push this wire into it as I heat it up with the soldering iron. This should be pretty easy. I recommend using a pair of ceramic tweezers so you can get a little bit more precise with this. There's the first one, let's get the other one on there. Remember, just line it up, put the soldering iron on it, and then push it into place. Now with those installed, we can go ahead and put this back on and leave that capped on tape to hold it down. I put the capped on tape up here, not on the back of the screen, just so it was easier to pull up. And this doesn't seem to be moving around, so I think we should be okay. Then just put the motherboard in place and push the ribbon cable in to lock it in. This ribbon cable feels a lot sturdier than the one that they had on the Game Boy Advance. When you're done, it should look something like this. You got the ribbon cable already locked in place, you have the wires hanging out the side, and the touchpad isn't connected yet. We're going to have to flip this over so we can solder those other two test points. The first pad that we need to pre-tin sits directly up from the RD right here. It's not this one, but the one above it. It's pretty small, so this is going to be pretty hard to film, but I wanted to show you this before I pre-tinned it. Not the one that sits by itself, but one directly up. And this is what's going to happen if you don't use flux. You're going to burn the silk screen, so make sure to put just a little bit of flux down so that flows easy into place. I'm not actually sure why, but I can't get the solder to stick on that via. I think I had to do something with the ink that was on the serial number, because now the pad is exposed. You couldn't see the copper before, but now you can actually see the trace. Okay, let's try again. The other via that we need to pre-tin is the one just above it, right here. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe off a little bit of that ink first. It looks a little more exposed now, so hopefully that works. Grab the wire that we pre-attached to the start button and put it down on the bottom. And the top one is for the select button. You want to make sure not to burn the wire when you're putting these together. They're pretty close, and soldering the top one first is probably advised. Now we can close it and see if it works. Now comes the exciting part. We can start putting in all the buttons and membranes. Then flip over the board and put it into place. You can also attach the touch sensor to the top. Flip this over, take off the adhesive, and stick it right onto the top part. To get the alignment good, I'm going to open mine again and just attach this touch sensor to the top of the Game Boy. Now that we got that in place, we can go back and flip it over. Put the speaker in and screw down the 3 Phillips screws to attach it to the shell. Make sure to get the wires underneath the board. You also want to make sure to use the correct screws. With the Funnyplaying shells, you have to make sure to use their screws. Unfortunately, this won't close very well. You have to trim down these pins on the back of the cartridge slot. If you don't, you'll do what I did, and it'll push into the bottom of the panel. For now, I'm going to go ahead and trim these down just to get those a little bit more flush with the actual board. I'm going to be using these hobby cutters to trim them down. You're going to notice you have this other piece of insulating film in your kit. This insulating film goes on the back of those pins. Take this and lay it directly on top of those pins, and it should look something like that. You can also put a piece of Kapton tape over top of this if it's not sticking well. If you didn't trim these down enough, you're going to be able to tell because it's not going to stick to the board. Mine's definitely borderline acceptable, but it's good enough for me. I did reorient mine a little bit more, so there was a little bit more adhesive on both sides. There we go, and I think that's good. So let's try closing the unit this time. I don't really think I like their insulating film. It needs to be just a little bigger, so I'm just going to take this off and put some Kapton tape instead. I think I'm much happier with that, and it also covers one of those vias. Now we can close up the unit and see if it turns on. Make sure you line it up good before you close it. Then just put the screws into place. I'm not sure why mine's not closing, but there's still a little wobble. It might be the back of the cartridge slot. Let's take it out and look one more time. I definitely think it's the back of that battery cartridge slot because it's still burrowing into the back of this board. I trimmed these down even more, and there's barely anything left of them. We now need to solder the last wire from pin labeled C to the connection on the ribbon cable that says power. So the first thing we want to do is to go ahead and attach that to the power button. I'm just going to put a little solder onto my soldering iron at 300 degrees still and attach that to the C. If you get a little bit too much, just clean off your soldering iron and go back in to take a little bit off. I'm going to put a little solder onto the ribbon cable first. Then we can go ahead and attach that little cable. And with that, we should be nearly finished. We just have to put the top part in for the IR reader and the power button switch. Then we can just put the back on and make sure it works. Grab your tri-wing screwdriver and your 6 tri-wing screws and close the back. Unfortunately, I don't know where this other screw went, so I'll see if I can find that, but I'll put that in after. Let's just see if it works. Let's pop the batteries back in. And it works. The touch sensor works at the top. Looks like we have 8 levels of brightness, a couple different display modes. I'm probably just going to use display mode 2. I'm going to leave frame insertion on. Let's see if we can come up with a cool color for the logo. Wow, there's a lot of colors for the logo. You can set it custom like this. So they go 30, 31, then they reset. So you have to go up to 31, then reset it. I'm going to set the blue to 0. That looks awesome. There's the X and Y position. To get out of the menu, I'm just assuming you leave it. Yeah, so the menu just closes by itself. Let's go back up to 8 brightness. I'm going to leave frame insertion on. And I'm going to max out the red brightness on the logo at 31. I actually like how this turned out. This is really nice. The speaker works well and everything looks good. To do the finishing touch, we got to put these stickers on, obviously. There we go. What do you guys think? I think that's okay. I think it was a little off, so I'm just going to reposition it. And there we go. Much better. Unfortunately, I ruined the corner, so I'll probably get one of the holographic ones. I think those look pretty cool. Let's get the serial number on. No, I messed that up. The serial numbers don't seem to go on very good a second time, and it kind of messed it up. I'm going to have to get a new sticker, and I'm going to have to get a new serial number. Do I even dare put this on the battery door? I kind of like the Game Boy logo there. I think this looks okay as is, and I probably won't put that sticker on. But it sure looks nice, and this turned out really well. Let's get a game and test it out. I got this copy of Link's Awakening from a coworker for about 10 bucks, so let's try this one and see if this works. Okay, let's turn it on. Ooh, It looks so nice in person. I don't know, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Have you guys ever tried this kit? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. What did you guys think about it? Yeah, everything seems to work good. Everything loads. Buttons all work. Test the D-pad out. That seems to work good. Not sure what these hotkeys are. Let me look it up and we'll give them a try. It looks like you can bring up the on-screen menu by pressing Start and Select. This allows you to automatically go through the different modes. You can press Start to cycle through the brightness, but this is also a good way to get a seizure. Holding Start allows you to go to the next mode if you press Start and the arrow. You can adjust the logo or anything else through here as well. I wonder if you can just hold down the Start button and move it over. No, you can't. You hold down Select. So Select lets you go to the last mode that you went through. Start lets you move ahead in the menu. I don't really like these hotkeys, but at least they're working compared to the last time I did this. I do really like the screen, and I think it's a really nice screen. Colors look bright and vibrant, and the logo underneath is pretty neat. However, I'm pretty sure that this part down here is going to bleed through the shell if you have the lights off. If you're looking for a good Game Boy kit, I do think this is a nice screen. It was pretty easy to put together, but it was a little hard to close. As with most Funnyplaying products, I've had a few quality control issues. The FPGA Game Boy, which looks nearly identical, had a few issues. The 3.5mm headphone jack on this would hiss, and so would the speaker. This one doesn't have any of those problems, fortunately, but there's a few other issues. I'm not sure if it's just my unit, but for some reason the button presses just don't seem very responsive. They feel a little bit different on the FPGA Game Boy for some reason. These feel a little loose. That could just be a slight variance because it's obviously the same kit. There's also a slight scratch here, and I checked the footage. I couldn't see where I could have caused this, so this likely came directly from the factory. This is not around a screw, so I don't think this was from over-tightening anything. All the screws appear to be fine, and the entire unit closed okay, so I'm not sure why this happened. But this is the only thing that I can find on the unit that looks a little concerning. There's no cracks on the bottom. The sides look okay. Actually, I'm not sure what this is. There's a little ring around there. That doesn't seem to come off either. That's kind of weird. There's no marks on the plastic near the seam like we had on the Game Boy Advance. And up near the top, it looks okay too. The screen looks bright and there's no dead pixels. The power button is easy to turn on and off, unlike the FPGA. This one takes a lot to turn it on, and it's pretty tight. When we compare this kit to the Analogue Pocket and the FPGA Game Boy from the same company, all three of these look vastly different. The FPGA Game Boy is definitely the darkest, but it has pretty nice colors. Moving up from there, the kit that we just installed is much brighter. This does not have any issues with the headphone jack or the speaker. However, you are getting a smaller screen, but it is a lot nicer. So it really comes down to preference. On the other end of the scale, maxing out in every aspect is the Analogue Pocket. This thing is so bright compared to these other two units, it's not even funny. The colors also look much more accurate. I do find the blues a little bit deeper on the FPGA kit and the IPS screen, but the Analogue Pocket is much more accurate and a hell of a lot brighter. Which screen do you like between these three? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Do you think this is worth the added cost over the FPGA Game Boy? And if you had any issues with your speaker or your headphone jack? Personally, I hope to see more FPGA handhelds redone from Funnyplaying. I think they did a pretty good job, but this definitely has a few bugs. And would you spend the money and go all the way for the Analogue Pocket, or is this screen good enough for you? The screen on the FPGA Game Boy comes out to 2.92 inches. The screen on the IPS kit comes out to 2.64 inches. And the Analogue Pocket tops the scale at around 3.5. So these are all drastically different size screens. They all look vastly different, and they're all going to do different things, but which one is good enough for you? Since I like a bright screen, I'm more likely to pick up this or my Analogue Pocket as opposed to the FPGA Game Boy. It's crazy to think how cheap this is compared to the actual IPS kit, or obviously compared to the Analogue Pocket. If you have any questions regarding these three units, make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you have any issues with your kit, I'd be glad to help. So as it sits, I am pretty impressed with this kit, but their quality control issues definitely leave me concerned. I've been starting to collect a couple Game Boys, and they're pretty fun to build. I'm just hoping down the road that Funnyplaying can get their quality control issues sorted out. With high-speed DITO and their AMOLED kit though, I think it's going to make a lot of these screens obsolete. Mine's on the way, and I'm excited to build it. If you have any questions, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and as always, thanks for watching.